Alright, so I wanted to kind of continue some porting stuff as I go step by step. I'm holding my really nice video camera, so this is actually kind of hard. I don't have the, I can't really hold it with one hand, so. Well, let me start over here then. So I started on the intake bowls. Like what I try to do what I've done is actually this time around, compared to the old heads, I made it a little easier on myself and just made kind of a list. So similar to that last video where I probably misspoke about a couple of things, I'm sure, which is why it's good to like do your own research and verify things. But I think for the most part I was like 90% spot on with what to do and what not to do to keep this really kind of quick and simple. So I made this list here, just porting checks. So, and I do these checks for the pair, so I won't cross anything out until I know all 8 or 16 steps in the case of the tunnels and bowls are complete. So like the first thing I did were those pinch areas, and I got all 8 of those intakes done, so there's a check on that. Next I quickly went through, and even though the exhaust ports aren't done yet or finalized, they could be touched up, is I mostly got the thermactor bumps done in all 8. So you may have to go back if you're going to do it that way. Here's the old heads, so... Sorry, this is not... It's a completely manual camera. So, like, the thermactor bumps there, so you just go in, and the nice thing about using the 1/4 inch this time around is how fast it is, so you can see the size of that. And this is also a 6-inch egg, and that burr is actually like around 500 thousandths, but I had to cut it down from a 6-inch to like a 3 or 4-inch, because depending on how much seat you have for that to go in, that'll start to get eccentricity from the weight on the end and could bend on you. So let's see. I'll get more into that in a sec. Sorry, this is so hard with this camera. I should have grabbed the little one. You can see I already started some Scavenge Plateau work, but the concept is to focus on one thing at a time. I've jumped around a little bit, so I'm kind of breaking my original idea, but that's also just to get a feel for that new, like using a 1/4 inch instead of an 1/8 inch, and you'll realize how much of a chore 1/8 inch can be if you do it that way. At the same time, there's a couple things I'll show you where it's a good idea to use an 1/8 inch. Here's a comparison of an 1/8 and a 1/4. So what else? So right now today I did a lot of work on this particular head for the short side, or the short turn radius. I did actually start to get on the short side of at least a couple of ports, because I was like I said, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to kind of stick to one thing at a time. But I have to do these quickly. Like, I'm trying to get a bulk of the work done for the weekend, basically. Like, the 1/4 inch is that much faster to do this whole job. So then the actual, like, the intake valve guide shape, what I mean there is like turning this into, of course, there's not one really close. If you look how that's shaped, and I'll probably, like I started to say, bring that in more to like closer to like a knife edge toward the back of the bowl. Then obviously the bowl radius is just kind of working this to what size and closer to the seat, so there's still, so it's a little tighter toward above the throat, I guess, or at the throat, right under the valve. And that's basically it. And then I have my values there. Basically for the exhaust ports, they're almost, it's slightly smaller, but you're almost just gasket matching a stock exhaust manifold gasket. Not even. But definitely not the header gasket. I think that's what I slipped up in the last video, is saying something about gasket matching. And you definitely don't want to open that up to the, like a 1/5/8 header. And of course I don't have that right next to me. Or actually, so this is like one that would come in a gasket kit. And this is still larger than the factory one. But for the best velocity, which is going to make better torque, and still probably more horsepower, like I got those figures. I'm going by Charles Servetio, so he finally mentioned numbers, and that was his figure. And if you measure the stock exhaust ports, that's basically what it is. Except, well, I can't show you on these, but there's like that one corner that's smaller, so you're almost just opening that. But I think if you wanted to just scribe the original, if you have the actual factory gasket, if you scribe to that, it'd probably be perfectly fine. That's not much different from that figure right there. So that is one tip. So, all right, let me open this aperture. These are not complete yet, but I started to work on, that is the exhaust Scavenge Plateau. Basically, you're just coming from this side, and you will need sacrificial valves. Don't really attempt it, like especially if this is your first time, don't attempt that. I foolishly used what were actually new valves, like the stock valves, before I got stainless steel, and they're perfectly fine on the seat. Like, it really doesn't matter, I guess, if you cut the bottom up. But I should have used, if you can use valves that can't, like I have 2 sets of valves now out of old 5.0s. So why because I could have sold these on eBay, plus I back cut them. So that was kind of dumb. I could maybe still sell them, but valves are so cheap, like no one's gonna say, okay, I'll take the imperfect ones, unless they're like $20 for the whole thing. So I did start on that. If you watch the last video, you'll figure out what that is. It just helps. Again, the exhaust is trying to escape and runs through this section. It should be your quench area of the cylinder. And this comes through at about 500 miles per hour. So this is when iron heads are not a benefit. Better anyway. So, where was I? Damn it. There we go. Alrighty. So that exhaust gas from the quench area is coming out at about 500 miles per hour. So what happens with this sharp edge into the combustion area is it leaves a lot of spent air, exhaust gases, in the chamber, and this helps scavenge them out. It helps add velocity, and so on. And I'd imagine it also helps with heat. So it's a really quick trick to do. I don't know really, I haven't seen many talk about like if it has any influence on swirl for whatever reason, like overall, or if it, like that's more your intake anyway, is where that's a kind of a value or where swirl is measured. But obviously in the milliseconds of timing, I don't know, no one's really spoken about it. They also haven't mentioned like if it picks up any CFM doing this, but I'd imagine it definitely helps with exhaust velocity overall, so it may very well help pick up some torque values. Either way, you're still helping exhaust gas escape, so the charge is the intake cycle is always a little fresher. So it's that quick and easy to do, especially with a 1/4 inch. I did already start the spark plug bung scallop, which you can see was already done in that, so now I don't have a stock one. Well, there's a stock one in the background. And as I said, you see how that's would be, I said it backwards or something last time, but so this would be convex. When you're looking at it, it's coming toward you, and then you're basically making that a scallop and making it concave. And actually the nice thing about this egg shape on a 1/4 inch is that, like with a long shank where you can almost get kind of completely perpendicular with that, is it makes a way better shape than what my last ones were. Not that it's a big deal, but they definitely look prettier. And then you're also going to round out right in front of that. I think overall this does help with swirl, and then if you did do, I'm not going to do it on these, I may round this out a little, but if you're doing the scallop here, and then I think you want to take down the center valve, which I already spoke about a little bit. So I'm just showing where I'm at right now, how quick and easy you can make this. Of course now I'm using my light on this board. So now, okay, so again, no, I can't totally show you the short turn in stock form, but I can show you something that I learned with, if you're on a micro budget and you can't really afford a ton of those long shanks. And I already had shorter shank 1/4s, but I don't really recommend them. If you can get a nice set of 6-inch ones, and then like I said, take a cutoff wheel, find the longest that you really need if you're going to come in from the intake port this way and get to anything. The thing is, if you go to take this oval or egg and just start in here, you can cut back in the bowl, and again, you don't want more than like 550 thousandths from the outside diameter of the valve stem hole to this wall right there. And I showed that in the last video. Then you're just going to blend everything here in. So it's not quite flat, but almost. And there's a sharp edge you're going to get rid of. The problem is this egg is already 500 thousandths, but that also works as a good measure because once you can fit this in and massage this portion back and forth next to the guide and the bowl. Like, yeah, you can start to open up the bowl side first, but it's still going to be a pinch here. So the best thing to do is, I have this one that's a little narrower. It's a pain in the ass and it wants to like rattle and roll, but if you're getting down, if you work really slow, a narrower one like this, I don't know what you would call this, it's not an oval, but just like the rounded straight cylinder, that'll open that up to about the point where you could get a 1/4 inch, like 500 thousandths oval. I haven't figured out yet how I'm gonna do the inside, but again, if you have 1/8 inch, that's where you could take at least the guide, because I don't really think you really are gonna take a lot of the bowl out there except for the short side radius, which you can kind of see there. So notice how those sharp edges are gone, and I've taken out some right there already. Those aren't completely blended yet. But most importantly is the short turn. So that being 550 thousandths is important. Also, I wonder if we can get a shot. Remember, we took only the roof portion of that pinch. So look toward the light and then to the left. And that's creating, basically, you're cutting in kind of like an apex to the turn of the tunnel. So that air coming from that end now has a nice straight shot. It's not going around the pinch and coming around. It's just, you almost have a straight shot to the bowl. So, sorry, this is a real pain with this camera. This is not the greatest video. I'm thinking I may film myself doing it, maybe with the other camera. I'm not going to put this camera next to flying iron shavings. So that's why I kind of jumped around on this head to like kind of get an idea of what I could do. But again, this, if you go on eBay, look up, I think this was like $55, just a generic Chinese flex shaft grinder. It's like, it claims it's 780 watts. I don't know. It definitely has enough low end torque to where it's gonna cut at any RPM, but it also has a foot pedal down there, which is kind of nice, but unless you leave it plugged in and accidentally step on it like I did when I came in here. The only thing I would say is, like, the cool thing about this is it has a regular drill style chuck instead of a collet. So this will fit any size shaft up to a 1/4 inch. The only problem with that is if you want to put you can put an 1/8 inch on this and that's just fine. But if you have to do finesse work, really tighten the bowl, you could potentially, you know, sorry, I'm trying to focus with one finger. You could potentially catch something on the valve seat, or like, it's, the long shank is definitely the way to go. I know that's what all professionals go by and that's what they'll tell you, but it is expensive. Like, this was probably 20 bucks. And then I still had to modify it and cut it because you can't find one that may be cheaper and shorter. So there's not a lot in between. You can still kind of fit the regular, what is that, like a 2-inch shank in there, but it's so risky with that thing. I'm trying to find, I have another flex shaft tool. I don't know where I put it, but that one has a narrower head, and that's how I did the original heads, was with one of those flex shafts, because it's safe to fit the end of it into like tunnels and bowls and stuff, and it only has a little collet on the end that could damage anything. But it's something to keep in mind. Like, it's like, if you're on a budget, it's one of those things where it's hard to kind of like say, oh, I only need this or that, because you'll find that it helps to have a couple of different Dremel kind of rotary die grinder options. I returned it, but I did have an extended shaft air grinder, and I kind of loved it, like at least the RPM, but this worked just as quick, just the electric one. And again, this was 55 bucks, so I would say get that, maybe like a $20 Chinese Dremel knockoff, because they always come with cool stuff, and then a couple of sets of double cut carbide. Like these, the 1/8 inch ones have lasted a lot. Like they still work pretty decent. But switching to the 1/4 inch, how fast this is going is insane. Like, yeah, there's a lot of finesse work to do, but again, I make a list of my main cuts, and then just kind of go to town and open that up to the spec that you that I told you, or whatever you want to try. But again, for stock valve, you're not doing much. You're opening up the short turn, the short side, opening that bowl a little bit. You know, knock down, a good rule of thumb is really just knocking down the valve guide boss here. Like, taking out a decent amount of material is opening up millimeters of space for air. Obviously there's that fine line of maintaining velocity, but I think if you follow what I'm showing you, again, it's sometimes I feel it's easier to follow someone you're not far behind from. And I take all my knowledge from, you know, the masters, if you will, and people with that much more experience than me. They're not always quick to give like exact dimensions, but that's the one that I know is the 550, and really just not hogging it out. Like, I made that mistake with my exhaust ports on the first heads before I really started to find information on E7s, but I think my intake work was decent. So I just stepped on it again. So always unplug that. There's my short side. I think those were mostly done, but I only had that 1/8 inch, so they maybe could have been brought down a little more. God, this video is gonna be awful. It's a beautiful video camera, but I have to keep manually focusing. So that could have been blended better. I'm gonna get all the info I can on how tall that floor should really be or not be. I think you don't want too much off the floor. But that's about it. Like I said, maybe once I get the procedures done on this bank, I'll make a video of me actually doing the work once I have some techniques that I can show. Because it is tricky when you're doing this section. When you're going into that section, like the tool, the rotary tool will sometimes dance. So that was why I said start with easy things like the pinch and the thermactor, so you kind of get a feel for how much pressure to put on the tool. Like, yeah, if you nicked a valve seat, like, yeah, it's not like you couldn't get stones to regrind it or get like a 3 angle. It's not the end of the head, depending on how far down you nick it, but it's better just to not at all, because like for me, I'm just valve lapping, so that's why I'm always safe with, like, if I'm working in the combustion chamber, I put the valves in. I mean, put both in. I have decent control to where I can do a Scavenge Plateau basically without putting a valve in, but I still put it in anyway. So that's kind of the best advice I can give you there. Other than that, doing again with the 1/8 inch was like, it made me feel like it's the hardest job in the world. Like, I don't know how anyone is in the business of porting. And then today, like, I was probably out here an hour or two. I got all the like, again, not quite fully blended, but these are, all 4 of these are now open to that 550 spec. Of course you can't totally see it. And I do have to blend it in a little more, but that's a majority of what's going on. Like, the exhaust doesn't really take long at all. And it depends if you're going to cut the valve guides completely down or not, which you should have. If you do that, you should have like bronze guides or whatever those guides are that go in them. But it is hard because, especially with a 1/4 inch, you can't really get to around the sides. So that's something where the 1/8 inch is probably good for the exhaust bowl. Other than that, like, there's not a lot that I have to do on these intakes that, like, to complete it. Like, I already did my pinch, short turn, started the short side, and then just opening it up a little. That's it. So with a 1/4 inch, and if you follow that guide, like, you're basically done. And I think it's hard, if you're conservative, it would be hard to not hit around 200 CFM. Like, if you're going bigger valve and you really want to push it to like 220 or something, fine. But let's just say it's not that hard to get these to be basically GT40s, a little better than GT40s technically. Like, it wouldn't be hard to get a few more CFM over a GT40. But the point is, the faster you can make it and the more conservative you can be, considering these are your free heads, like, the better. Then you won't feel like you wasted your time and you should have just bought aluminum heads. So that's all it takes. Like, in a weekend, if you really focus on it, just wear your shield, wear a P100 respirator, especially, like, I'm in a garage right now. Normally I would do this outside and I would still have a fan blowing, because you don't want to breathe in like iron particulates and like metal gases. I've had exposure, and not the most extreme, but it's still kind of freaky. It'll make you feel numb and like feeling like you can't breathe, and you don't want to play with that really. So but that's about all. You can, again, for less than $100, you can do it and open up, I don't know what, like 40 to 60 CFM or something like that over factory. Like, why not? Like, I have people now, the big debate, especially people who are doing this, I feel like are probably speed density people too, like mass air people. They're always gonna buy like aluminum stuff. Not that they don't do E7s, but I feel like speed density people are always on more of a budget. And there's a lot of debate. Like, you'll always get a naysayer. That's why I stay away from forums. Like, there's always someone. It's never helpful. Like, you work with Arduino or electronics, anything like that, 99% of the people are helpful and they want anything you're working on to work. Car people, because of this ego and competitiveness and the kind of douchebags that go to car shows, their kind of thinking is like, I'm going to put this person down or tell them that, oh, you're not going to be able to do that. There's a lot of people running quick or powerful speed density cars. A lot of it has to do with the camshaft. So you read conflicting things like, oh, don't go narrower than a 114 lobe separation angle. But that's not exactly, like, other people will say, oh, it's the overlap, which you can calculate with your cam card. Like, I think you add the advertised duration, like divide that by 2, then subtract something. I don't remember exactly the formula, but so like my cam's a 112 LSA, but I've seen someone running like an E303, which is a 110 LSA, which would probably give it more low-end torque actually. But that one, for example, was running in speed density, and I have a custom chip, so we'll see. Like, I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but I think a well-balanced engine, if you are going like a mild RV or a 3/4 level cam, like ported E7, like that's perfect. Like that, the intake, again, like getting it into like LS1 territory, for a 302 or 308, 306, whatever your exact car is, or even if it is a stroker like a 331 or 347. um, I think the speed density can work fine, but more importantly, that you can say, oh, that's the factory castings. So I know like certain race classes, that's the restriction. Like you have to run stock heads. So I think that's where a lot of the porting knowledge on these comes from. But you can take pride in that. Like again, I already had heads. Like they could still run. Like they just have hogged out exhaust. Like if it was something with a blower or turbo, it probably wouldn't even notice. But and I'm picking up another pair for $100. Like it's it's like Salvation Army performance. So don't worry if you do maybe screw something up. Like you can replace the head, um, but still treat it like these were $2,000 heads and be careful. But anyway, that's all for now. I may do another one of these intermediate videos, and then from there, maybe I don't know yet, because I don't want to step on anyone else showing stuff, or like I know people are doing this for a business. I'm not. This is really just for people who want to work their own stuff and don't need to know all of the technical details, which I'm fairly knowledgeable. I'm surprised how much I've learned about cylinder heads and flow and everything, but this is from one person doing it for themselves to someone else. Like I'm not looking to port your heads or have you take this and make a business out of it, because you need to know that much more and have a decent amount more of skill set, because you're not going to get by on just knowing how to port E7s, obviously. Same like me, I know all the ins and outs and how to rebuild an AOD transmission. You give me the TH350, I'd have some idea of how it operates, but I would have to start from scratch. So the only truck I truly know is my 91 van. So that's like the only vehicle I'm confident in working on. But anyway, so yeah, go ahead, like go for it. If you're building an Iron 5.0, like I said, you could make 350 plus horsepower with the right cam and intake combo on this. So especially if you're going with the larger valves, and double especially if it's a roller like a Mustang. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it there. I basically covered everything that's going on with this new pair. I've been lazy the last couple of weeks, so I'm finally, now that the weather's cooler, I'm gonna start cranking on this project and try and get my van running. So anyway, that's all.